Welcome, Vorldrevolution. Here is audiobook summary of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Introduction, a blueprint for connection. Picture this. It's 1936. The world is reeling from the Great Depression, and a man named Dale Carnegie, a farm boy turned global influencer, releases a book that promises to unlock the secrets of human relationships. That book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, wasn't just a hit. It became a phenomenon, selling over 10 million copies in 36 languages and shaping lives for nearly a century. Why? Because Carnegie tapped into something universal, our deep, primal need to connect, to be understood, and to matter. Welcome to this audiobook summary, a 60-minute journey through Carnegie's timeless wisdom. I'm your guide, and together we'll explore the stories, principles, and practical tools that can transform how you navigate your world, whether it's at work, home, or anywhere in between. So, let's step back in time and dive into Carnegie's laboratory of human connection, where every lesson feels like a conversation with a wise friend. Part 1. Fundamental Techniques in Handling People. Carnegie opens with a bang, or rather, a gunshot. It's 1931, and Two-Gun Crowley, a notorious killer, is cornered in a New York apartment, bullets flying. As police close in, he scribbles a note. Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm. A murderer who sees himself as a victim. This, Carnegie says, is human nature. We don't blame ourselves. Al Capone called himself a public benefactor. Even convicts in Sing Sing, according to Warden Lewis laws, rationalize their crimes. So principle 1 hits hard. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Criticism is a boomerang. It wounds pride, stirs resentment, and changes nothing. Take George Johnston, a safety coordinator who used to scold workers for skipping hard hats. They'd grumble and ditch them anyway. Then he tried asking if the hats fit right, gently suggesting their purpose. Compliance soared. No resentment, just results. Next, principle 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Charles Schwab, a steel tycoon, earned $1 million a year, not for his metallurgy, but for making people feel valued. Carnegie tells us appreciation isn't flattery. It's specific, heartfelt recognition. Imagine thanking a colleague for their sharp report. Not just good job, but your analysis saved us hours. It's fuel for the soul. Finally, principle 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. Carnegie cites John Dewey. We all crave importance. Want someone to act. Show them what's in it for them. A father got his son to pick up pears by offering $1 per basket and docking $1 per missed pear. The kid didn't just comply, he excelled. These 3 rules are the bedrock: understand, appreciate, motivate. Simple, but revolutionary. Introduction. The heart of human connection. Imagine a bustling New York street in 1931, sirens wailing, bullets cracking through the air. A killer named Two-Gun Crowley is holed up in his sweetheart's apartment, surrounded by 150 cops. As the gunfire echoes, he scribbles a note. Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm. Welcome to the wild opening of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, specifically Part 1. Fundamental Techniques in Handling People. I'm your narrator, and for the next 30 minutes, we're diving deep into this cornerstone of Carnegie's wisdom. Published in 1936, this book grew from a Missouri farm boy's quest to understand why we clash and how we can connect. Part 1 lays the groundwork with 3 principles that feel simple but hit like revelations. They're about seeing people as they see themselves, lifting them up, and sparking their desire to act. Ready? Let's step into Carnegie's world, where every story teaches us something profound about ourselves. Principle 1. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Let's start with that shootout. Crowley, a cop killer who gunned down an officer for asking to see his license, didn't see himself as a monster. Even as he faced the electric chair, he sighed. This is what I get for defending myself. Carnegie grabs this tale to hammer home principle 1. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Why? Because people, whether killers or co-workers, don't blame themselves. Al Capone, Chicago's infamous gangster, called himself a public benefactor. Dutch Schultz, another mobster, echoed the same. Carnegie even corresponded with Lewis Laws, warden of Sing Sing prison, who said inmates there saw themselves as misunderstood, not evil. They rationalized cracking safes or pulling triggers as if it were just another day at the office. Now, shift from criminals to everyday life. John Wanamaker, the retail giant, confessed he learned early that scolding was pointless. People's flaws aren't their fault in their own eyes. Carnegie admits he blundered for decades before this sank in. Take George Johnston, a safety coordinator in Oklahoma. He used to bark at workers skipping hard hats, citing rules with a stern finger. They'd nod sullenly, then ditch the hats the moment he turned away. Frustrated, he tried a new tack. Are those hats uncomfortable? They're here to keep you safe. Mind wearing them. No orders, just a question. The workers kept them on, no grumbling. Why? Criticism breeds resentment. Understanding breeds cooperation. History backs this up. Theodore Roosevelt blasted President Taft, splitting the Republican Party in 1912 and handing the White House to Woodrow Wilson. Taft, teary-eyed, insisted, "I don't see how I could have done any differently." Roosevelt's attacks didn't sway him. They just hardened his stance. Or consider the Teapot Dome scandal. Secretary Albert Fall, caught in a corrupt oil deal, faced prison but wailed that he was betrayed. His wife screamed he'd been crucified. Carnegie's point? Blame boomerangs. Even Abraham Lincoln, dying from an assassin's bullet in 1865, earned praise from Secretary Stanton as the most perfect ruler of men because he learned this lesson. As a young man, Lincoln mocked rivals with biting letters, once nearly dueling James Shields over one. But after that close call, he stopped. During the Civil War, when General Meade let Lee escape at Gettysburg, Lincoln wrote a scathing letter, then tucked it away unsent, knowing it'd only spark defensiveness. Next time you're tempted to snap, Carnegie says, pull out a $5 bill, look at Lincoln, and ask, what would he do? Principle 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Now, let's flip the coin. If criticism tears down, what builds up? Principle 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Carnegie introduces us to Charles Schwab, not the financial guru of today, but a steel magnate in the early 20th century. Schwab pulled in $1 million a year, a fortune then, not for his technical know-how, but for his knack for making people feel valued. I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise, he said. Carnegie latches onto this. We all thirst for approval, as psychologist Hans Selye noted, yet dread condemnation. Appreciation isn't flattery, it's specific, from the heart. Schwab didn't just say nice work, he'd point out exactly why someone's effort shone. Think about it. When did a thank you last light you up? Carnegie shares a personal tale. He once dashed off a cocky note to author Richard Harding Davis, ending with dictated but not read, to seem important. Davis fired it back with a jab. Your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners. Ouch. Carnegie learned appreciation matters more than swagger. Contrast that with Bob Hoover, a test pilot whose plane crashed after a mechanic fueled it with jet fuel instead of gasoline. Furious? Sure. But instead of chewing the guy out, Hoover put an arm around him and said, to show I trust you won't mess up again, service my F-51 tomorrow. The mechanic didn't just fix the plane, he became a loyal ally. Carnegie ties this to B.F. Skinner's research. Reward beats punishment every time. Animals and people learn faster when praised. He reprints Father Forgets, a poignant piece by W. Livingston Larned. A father, harsh with his son over spilled food and messy habits, creeps into the boy's room at night, struck by remorse. What has habit done to me? He wonders, seeing the boy's crumpled form and realizing his small heart was as big as the dawn. Tomorrow, he vows, I'll be a real daddy. Praise, Carnegie says, doesn't just mend, it transforms. Try it. Tell someone what they did right, mean it, and watch them glow. Principle 3. Arouse in the other person an eager want. Finally, we hit Principle 3. Arouse in the other person an eager want. Carnegie asks, how do you get anyone to do anything? Not with a gun or a threat. Those backfire. The only way, he insists, is to make them want to. Sigmund Freud said we're driven by sex and greatness. John Dewey called it the desire to be important. Carnegie blends these. People act when they see what's in it for them. He tells of a factory worker who hated cleaning stockrooms. Orders didn't work until the boss said, John, if you tidy this now, I can show off our setup to clients tomorrow. You'll make us look sharp. John didn't just sweep. He polished, beaming with pride. Or take Woodrow Wilson, who tapped Colonel Edward House as a peace envoy in 1915. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan ached for the role, but Wilson picked House. How'd House break the news? The president thought it'd draw too much attention if you went. You're too big a name. Bryan, flattered, stepped aside happily. Carnegie's point? Match your ask to their desires. A kid shirking pear-picking got hooked when his dad offered $1 per basket, and $1 off for misses. He didn't just pick, he hunted every pear down. Carnegie reflects on his own sales days, peddling soap in South Dakota. He'd ride freight trains, chat up storekeepers, and frame deals as their gang. This'll move fast off your shelves. It worked because he saw their world. This principle isn't manipulation, it's alignment. Want your spouse to join you for a walk? Don't nag, say, "It'd mean a lot to stroll with you tonight." Desire, not duty, drives action. Conclusion, the power of understanding. So, what ties these three together as we wind down? Carnegie's Part 1 is a crash course in human nature. Don't criticize, people defend their pride like forts. Appreciate sincerely, they bloom under recognition. Ignite their wants, they'll move mountains for their own reasons. From Lincoln sparing me to Hoover lifting a mechanic, these aren't just tips, they're a mindset. Carnegie spent years teaching this to engineers and clerks, watching them turn foes into friends, profits into leaps. He promises no less for us: smoother contacts, happier homes. As of today, February 28, 2025, these truths hold. We're still emotional creatures, bristling with pride, craving importance. Try it tomorrow. Skip the complaint, praise something small, offer a reason they'll love. It's not about winning arguments, it's about winning hearts. Carnegie's lab tested it. His students lived it. Now it's your turn. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Part 1. Let's carry these fundamentals forward, because people, at their core, never change. Part 2. 6 ways to make people like you. Now, Carnegie shifts gears. How do you become someone people want to be around? Principle 1. Become genuinely interested in other people. He shares a gem from Alfred Adler. It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life. Carnegie tested this himself, once spending hours with a botanist he barely knew, just listening. The man dubbed him a great conversationalist, though Carnegie hardly spoke. It's about them, not you. Principle 2. Smile. Sounds basic, right? But Carnegie recounts a department store that nearly fired clerks for not smiling, until they realized it doubled sales. A smile says, "I'm glad you're here," without a word. Principle 3. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound in any language. Jim Farley, a political mastermind, remembered thousands of names, turning strangers into allies. Misspell my name, and I'll wince. Get it right, and I'm yours. Principle 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Carnegie met a woman at a dull party who loved her travels. He asked questions, and she glowed, later calling him charming. Listening is active, not passive. Principle 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. Theodore Roosevelt studied obscure topics just to chat with visitors about their passions. It's like handing someone their favorite dessert. Finally, Principle 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. A clerk brightened when Carnegie admired her memory for his order. Genuine praise lifts spirits like nothing else. These 6 steps? They're a recipe for likability, baked in empathy. Let's see in the detail. Introduction. The art of being likable. Picture yourself at a crowded party in 1930s New York. Stiff collars, clinking glasses, and a sea of strangers. You're nervous, unsure how to break the ice. Then someone approaches, smiles, asks about your day, and suddenly, you feel like the most interesting person in the room. That's the magic Dale Carnegie unpacks in Part 2 of How to Win Friends and Influence People. 6 ways to make people like you. Welcome to this 30-minute audiobook journey. I'm your narrator, and we're stepping into Carnegie's world, where likability isn't about charm or charisma, but about simple, heartfelt actions anyone can master. Born from his years teaching harried business folks in YMCA classrooms, this section offers a roadmap to turn strangers into friends. Published in 1936, it sold millions because it taps something timeless. We all want to be liked. So, let's explore these 6 principles, each a story, each a lesson, starting with a surprising truth about conversation. Principle 1. Become genuinely interested in other people. Carnegie kicks off with Principle 1. Become genuinely interested in other people. He quotes psychologist Alfred Adler. The individual who is not interested in his fellow men has the greatest difficulties in life. It's a bold claim, but Carnegie backs it with his own tale. Once, at a dull dinner, he met a botanist. Plants weren't his thing, but he asked questions about ferns, flowers, the works. For hours, the man lit up, later calling Carnegie a great conversationalist. Funny thing, Carnegie barely spoke. He just listened, genuinely curious. The botanist felt seen, and that's the trick. Interest isn't fake. It's a spotlight you shine on someone else. Think of Theodore Roosevelt, TR to his friends. Before guests arrived at the White House, he'd cram on their hobbies, from birdwatching to boxing, so he could chat about their passions. A butler once marveled as TR grilled him on Irish folklore. Result? People adored him. Carnegie saw this in his classes, too. Take Patrick O'Hare, an Irish immigrant turned salesman. Shy and tongue-tied, he joined Carnegie's course in the 1930s. By asking about clients' lives, kids, crops, anything, he shed his fear and won their trust, charming 2,500 people at the Hotel Pennsylvania in 1935. Interest isn't just politeness, it's a bridge. Next time you meet someone, Carnegie says, ask about their world and mean it. Principle 2, smile. Now, Principle 2, smile. Sounds too easy, right? But Carnegie spins a yarn about a department store in New York where sales slumped because clerks scowled. Managers nearly fired them until they mandated smiles. Sales doubled. Why? A smile says, I'm glad you're here, without a word. Carnegie cites a letter from a man who hadn't smiled in 14 years. My face felt like a mask. Then, inspired by this book, he grinned at a stranger. That spark warmed his whole day. He wrote Carnegie, it's changed my life. Or take Charles Schwab, the steel tycoon. He didn't just manage mills. He grinned his way to $1 million salary, saying, a smile costs nothing but creates much. Carnegie ties this to science. A dog wags its tail when happy, and we feel happy when it does. Smiling works the same. It lifts you and them. Picture this. Carnegie once walked into a post office, tired and grumpy. The clerk looked sour, too. But Carnegie flashed a smile and said, you handle a lot here. Thanks. The clerk softened, even smiled back. It's not fake cheer. It's a signal of goodwill. Try it tomorrow. Smile at your barista, your boss, your mirror. Carnegie bets you'll see the difference. Principle 3. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound. Next up, Principle 3. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Carnegie introduces Jim Farley, a political wizard who helped Franklin Roosevelt win the presidency. Farley's secret? He remembered thousands of names, first names, too. At a rally, he'd call out, hey, Mary, or good to see you, Tom. And folks felt like royalty. He kept files, tracked birthdays, and turned strangers into votes. Carnegie nods. A name is identity, pride, a personal anthem. Contrast that with Carnegie's own goof. Writing to Richard Harding Davis, he misspelled the author's name. A tiny slip, but Davis sent the letter back with a scrawl. Your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners. Lesson learned. Carnegie tells of a clerk he met often, Miss Nicodemus. He remembered her name, used it, and watched her beam. You're the only one who gets it right. It's not just memory, it's respect. In his courses, students practiced this. Sales spiked when they greeted clients by name. Misspell mine, and I'll flinch. Nail it, and I'm yours. Carnegie's tip? Jot names down, repeat them aloud. It's a small key to a big door. Principle 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Principle 4 shifts focus. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Carnegie paints a scene. He's at a party, bored stiff, when a woman mentions her travels. He asks about Paris, Rome. She talks for hours, glowing, and later calls him fascinating. He chuckles. He said almost nothing. Listening isn't passive. It's active, a gift. Sigmund Freud, he notes, mastered this. Patients poured out their souls because he truly heard them. Carnegie contrasts this with chatterboxes who dominate, leaving others cold. Take Lowell Thomas, Carnegie's friend and a radio star. Hosting bridge at his house, Thomas drew Carnegie in, asking about his life. Carnegie, a bridge novice, felt at ease spilling stories because Thomas listened. Or Godfrey Meyer, a banker from Carnegie's course. Once mute with fear, he learned to ask townsfolk about their gripes at a Clifton, New Jersey, meeting. They talked. He won their votes for council. Carnegie's students found this gold. Let a client vent about their day, and they'll love you for it. Next conversation, try this. Ask, nod, don't interrupt. Carnegie says you'll be amazed. They'll think you're brilliant for saying so little. Principle 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. Principle 5 flows naturally. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. Carnegie circles back to Roosevelt. Before a diplomat visited, TR boned up on their obscure passions, like Persian rugs or rare birds. A guest once left stunned, saying, he knows more about my field than I do. Carnegie saw this in action with a printer, Keith Roper. A new employee turned out stellar work. Instead of generic praise, Roper asked about his process, tying it to the shop's goals. The guy opened up, proud to share. Interest met interest, loyalty followed. Carnegie recalls his bacon-selling days in South Dakota. He'd ride freight trains, chatting with storekeepers about their trade. How's the beef moving this week? They'd light up, and he'd sell more soap. It's like serving someone their favorite meal. A student in Carnegie's class tried this with a gruff boss, asking about his fishing trips. The boss thawed, even invited him along. Carnegie's nudge? Find their hobby, their dream. Talk there, not here. It's not about you, it's about them. Principle 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Finally, Principle 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Carnegie echoes Dewey. We crave significance. He tells of meeting a post office clerk, noticing her knack for recalling his orders. You've got a memory like a steel trap, he said, meaning it. She blushed. No one's ever said that. A tiny lift, a big impact. Charles Schwab lived this, too. He'd stop by a worker's station, praise their precision, and watch them swell with pride. Sincerity, Carnegie stresses, is key. Flattery flops. Take Mrs. Ruth Hopkins, a Brooklyn teacher facing Tommy, a notorious troublemaker. Day 1. She said, Tommy, I hear you're a natural leader. I'm counting on you to make this class great. She meant it, and he rose to it. No more fights, just focus. Carnegie's courses buzzed with these wins. A salesman doubled accounts by spotlighting clients' small victories. Try it. Tell your kid, your coworker, they're vital. Then prove it with specifics. Carnegie bets they'll shine. Conclusion, the likability recipe. So, here we are, wrapping up part 2's 6 ingredients. Interest, smiles, names, listening, their passions, and importance. Carnegie forged these in his 1930s classrooms, watching shy folks like Patrick O'Hare bloom into crowd pleasers. By February 28, 2025, they still ring true, because we're wired for connection. Picture that party again. You smile, ask their name, listen to their tale, tie it to their world, make them feel big. They won't just like you, they'll seek you out. Carnegie's not selling tricks, he's offering a way to see people. Test it. Tomorrow, pick one principle, smile, listen, praise, and watch. Thanks for joining me on this dive into likability. It's simple, it's human, and it works. Part 3. How to win people to your way of thinking. Here's where Carnegie gets tactical. Influencing without alienating. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. He cites Ben Franklin, once a brash debater, who learned tact. I will speak ill of no man. Arguments entrench, sidestep them. Principle 2. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, you're wrong. A lumber salesman won a contract by nodding at a client's rant, then gently pivoting. Respect opens doors. Principle 3. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Carnegie once apologized mid-argument with a cop and got off with a warning. It disarms tension. Principle 4. Begin in a friendly way. Lincoln calmed a furious crowd by calling them friends, not foes. Friendliness melts ice. Principle 5. Get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately. Socrates asked questions folks couldn't deny, building agreement. A salesman got a no client nodding about small needs, then sold big. Principle 6. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Carnegie watched a boss let an engineer vent for hours, then agree without a fight. Listening wins more than shouting. Principle 7. Let the other person feel that the idea is his. A designer let clients tweak his plans. They loved their creation. Principle 8. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. A striking worker softened when his boss imagined his hunger. Empathy bridges gaps. Principle 9. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Saying, I'd feel the same, turns foes into allies. Principle 10. Appeal to the nobler motives. A hotel manager got a guest to pay by praising his fairness. Principle 11. Dramatize your ideas. A salesman tossed coins to show savings. Vivid trumps dull. Principle 12. Throw down a challenge. Charles Schwab bet workers could outdo their best, and they did. These 12 principles. They're persuasion with heart, not force. Introduction. The power of persuasion. Imagine it's 1863, and Abraham Lincoln is pacing the White House, furious. General Meade has let Confederate General Lee slip away after Gettysburg. A golden chance to end the Civil War, lost. Lincoln pens a scorching letter, then pauses, tucks it away unsent. Why? He knew arguing wouldn't win Meade over. It had just hardened his resolve. Welcome to part 3 of How to Win Friends and Influence People. How to win people to your way of thinking. I'm your narrator, and for the next 30 minutes, we're stepping into Dale Carnegie's toolbox of persuasion, forged in the 1930s from his YMCA classes and a lifetime of watching people clash and connect. Published in 1936, this book sold millions because it cracks a universal code. How do you sway someone without starting a war? Part 3 offers 12 principles, not to dominate, but to align. From Lincoln's restraint to a salesman's charm, let's explore how to turn no into yes, with heart, not force. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Carnegie starts with a bombshell. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. He quotes Ben Franklin, once a brash debater. If you argue and contradict, you may win a victory, but it will be an empty one. Franklin learned tact. I will speak ill of no man, and became a diplomatic legend. Carnegie nods to history. Theodore Roosevelt blasted Taft in 1912, splitting the Republican Party. Taft didn't budge, just wept. I don't see how I could have done differently. Arguments entrench, avoidance opens doors. Picture Carnegie in his courses. A student, a lumber salesman, faced a client raging about late shipments. Instead of debating, he sidestepped. Let's figure this out together. The client calmed, and the deal closed. Carnegie says arguments are traps. Pride locks us in. Next time your spouse snaps or a coworker digs in, don't swing back. Dodge the fight, and you're halfway to winning. Principle 2. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, you're wrong. Principle 2 flows in. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, you're wrong. Carnegie warns that you're wrong is a match to pride's fuse. He tells of a dinner where he debated a guest quoting Shakespeare, only to get a letter proving he'd misattributed it. Instead of doubling down, he apologized, and the guest became a friend. Respect, not rebuttal, wins. A Carnegie student, a factory manager, faced a worker insisting a machine was fine despite breakdowns. Saying you're wrong would have sparked a row. Instead, he asked, what makes you think it's running smooth? The worker vented, then admitted flaws, problem solved. Carnegie's tip? Nod, listen, respect. It's not weakness, it's strategy. Principle 3. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Principle 3 is bold. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Carnegie shares a personal flub. Stopped by a cop for walking his dog off leash, he argued. Until he didn't. You're right, officer. I slipped up, he said, grinning. The cop waved him off with a warning. Admitting fault disarms, defuses. He cites Lincoln again. Those unsent letters showed a man who'd rather eat crow than stir resentment. A course graduate, an accountant, botched a client's taxes. Before the client raged, he called, I messed up your return. Let me fix it. The client thanked him for honesty. Carnegie says owning mistakes isn't losing, it's gaining trust. Next blunder? Fess up fast and watch tension melt. Principle 4. Begin in a friendly way. Principle 4 softens the ground. Begin in a friendly way. Carnegie recalls Lincoln facing a mob in 1860s Illinois, baying for Southern blood. Friends, he started, we're in this together. They quieted, swayed by warmth. Carnegie saw this in action. A landlord facing a tenant skipping rent didn't storm in with threats. I know times are tough, he began, smiling. The tenant paid up, grateful. In his classes, a salesman used this to pitch a skeptic. I'd love your take on this. Mind if I sit? Friendliness won a hearing. Carnegie's point? Honey catches flies. Vinegar just stings. Start with a handshake, literal or not, and doors crack open. Principle 5. Get the other person saying, yes, yes, immediately. Principle 5 is clever. Get the other person saying, yes, yes, immediately. Carnegie nods to Socrates, who asked simple questions. Is the sky blue? Building agreement step by step. A Carnegie student, a car dealer, faced a buyer saying no to a trade-in. Do you want a reliable ride? Yes. Something affordable? Yes. Small yes led to a sale. Carnegie tried it selling soap in South Dakota. Need stock that moves fast? Yes. This will. Deal done. It's momentum. Get them nodding, and no fades. Next pitch. Ask easy questions first, like saving time, and roll from there. Carnegie says it's psychology, not trickery. Principle 6. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Principle 6 flips the script. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Carnegie tells of a boss facing an engineer demanding a raise. Instead of arguing, the boss asked, why do you deserve it? The engineer talked for hours, listing wins. Exhausted, he agreed to wait, convinced himself. Carnegie saw this in his courses. A shy banker, Godfrey Meyer, let townsfolk vent about taxes at a Clifton meeting. They talked. He won their votes. Carnegie learned this young, chatting up Dakota storekeepers. How's business? They'd spill, and he'd sell. Listening isn't silence, it's power. Next disagreement, ask, what's your side? Let them run, you'll win without a word. Principle 7. Let the other person feel that the idea is his. Principle 7 is subtle. Let the other person feel that the idea is his. Carnegie shares a designer who pitched blueprints to picky clients. Instead of pushing, he'd say, what if we tweak this corner? They'd suggest his plan, thrilled it was theirs. Ownership breeds buy-in. A course student, a marketer, wanted a team slogan. He tossed out hints, something punchy, and let them craft it, beaming at their win. Carnegie ties this to Charles Schwab, who'd ask workers, how do you boost output? They'd suggest his ideas, proud as peacocks. Plant the seed, Carnegie says, and let them water it. Try it. Nudge, don't dictate. Principle 8. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Principle 8 digs deep. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Carnegie tells of a strike. Workers demanded more, bosses balked. One manager asked a striker, "What's it like feeding your kids on this?" The man softened, and a deal emerged. Empathy bridges chasms. In his classes, a clerk faced an irate customer over a return. "If I were you, I'd be mad too," she said. The customer calmed, agreed to a fix. Carnegie learned this selling bacon. "If I ran your store, I'd want fast movers too." Sales soared. Step into their shoes, he urges, and they'll walk with you. Principle 9. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Principle 9 builds on that. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Carnegie shares a tale of a tenant griping about rent hikes. "I'd feel squeezed too," the landlord said. The tenant eased up, paid. Sympathy isn't agreement, it's feeling with them. A student, a parent, faced a teen skipping chores. "I get it, school's rough," he said. The kid pitched in, understood. Carnegie saw this in his courses. "I'd be upset too" turned foes to allies. Next clash, say, "I hear you," and mean it. It's a bomb that heals. Principle 10. Appeal to the nobler motives. Principle 10 lifts higher. Appeal to the nobler motives. Carnegie recounts a hotel manager chasing a deadbeat guest. "I know you're a man of honor," he said. The guest paid, flattered. "People want to be good, tap that." A salesman in Carnegie's class sold a tough client by saying, "Your reputation for fairness deserves this deal." Sold. Carnegie learned this peddling soap. You're known for quality stock. Pride drove purchases. Call out their best self, he says, and they'll rise. Principle 11. Dramatize your ideas. Principle 11 adds flair. Dramatize your ideas. Carnegie tells of a salesman tossing coins on a table. "That's your savings." The client signed, hooked by the show. Vivid beats vague. Charles Schwab once bet workers they couldn't top their record. They smashed it, spurred by the challenge's spark. In Carnegie's courses, a speaker waved a prop, a broken gear, to pitch safety. The room leaned in. Next time, don't just talk, show. Paint it bold. Principle 12. Throw down a challenge. Finally, Principle 12. Throw down a challenge. Carnegie circles back to Schwab. Beat yesterday's output. Workers did, fired by competition. A student, a teacher, told a slacker, "I bet you can't ace this." He did, grinning. Carnegie saw it selling. "Can you move this by Friday?" They'd hustle. Challenge taps pride, desire. Next goal, dare them. "Think you can pull this off?" Watch them soar. Conclusion, winning with wisdom. Here we are, 12 steps to sway without strife. Avoid fights, respect, admit faults, be friendly, build yes, listen, share credit, empathize, sympathize, ennoble, dramatize, challenge. Carnegie honed these in 1930s classrooms, turning shy souls into influencers. By February 28, 2025, they still work, because we're creatures of pride and heart. Lincoln knew it, Schwab lived it, Carnegie taught it. Test one tomorrow. Nod, listen, challenge, and see. It's not about winning arguments. It's about winning people. Thanks for this journey into part 3. Now, go persuade with grace. Part 4. Be a leader. How to change people without giving offense. Leadership isn't barking orders. It's inspiring change. Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. A manager praised a sloppy printer's potential. Output soared. Principle 2. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. A boss swapped a worker's typo-filled letter with a subtle, "This could be sharper." Fixed, no fuss. Principle 3. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing. Carnegie admitted his own blunders before correcting students. They listened. Principle 4. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Could we try this? Beats do it. A factory hummed when a foreman asked, not demanded. Principle 5. Let the other person save face. Bob Hoover, a pilot, spared a mechanic's pride after a fuel mix-up, saying, "Prove you won't do it again." Loyalty followed. Principle 6. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Parents turned surly kids into helpers by cheering small wins. Principle 7. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. A teacher dubbed a troublemaker a leader, he rose to it. Principle 8. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. A dad timed his son's math drills, celebrating progress. Grades skyrocketed. Principle 9. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. A store manager made a worker a price tag supervisor. She thrived. These 9. Their leadership alchemy, turning resistance into enthusiasm. Introduction: the gentle art of leadership. Imagine it's 1940s Los Angeles, and a test pilot named Bob Hoover limps his damaged plane to a runway after both engines quit mid-flight. The culprit? A mechanic who fueled it with jet fuel instead of gasoline. Fury could have ruled the day, but Hoover chose differently. He put an arm around the trembling young man and said, "To prove you won't mess up again, service my F-51 tomorrow." Welcome to part 4 of How to Win Friends and Influence People. Be a leader. How to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. I'm your narrator, and for the next 30 minutes, we're stepping into Dale Carnegie's vision of leadership, born in the 1930s from his YMCA classes and a lifetime of watching people grow or clash. Published in 1936, this book's a global sensation because it redefines leading, not barking orders, but inspiring change with grace. Part 4 offers 9 principles to shift attitudes without breaking spirits. From Hoover's mercy to a teacher's triumph, let's explore how to lead by lifting. Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. Carnegie starts with Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. Picture Henry Hankey, a truck dealership service manager in Indiana. A mechanic's work had slipped, shoddy repairs, slow pace. Hankey could have chewed him out, but instead, he called him in. "Bill, you're a fine mechanic. Customers rave about your past jobs. Lately, though, it's not your best. Let's fix this together." Bill perked up, fixed his ways. No resentment, just results. Praise wasn't fluff, it was a foundation. Carnegie saw this in his courses. A printer, Keith Roper, got stunning work from a newbie by saying, "This is the best I've seen here in ages." The kid beamed, doubled down. Carnegie ties it to Charles Schwab, who'd start with, "I'm proud of your output," before tweaking. Why? We bloom under sunlight, not storms. Next time you correct, start with a "You're great at this." Watch the shift. Principle 2. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. Principle 2 softens the blow. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. Carnegie tells of a boss facing a typist's error-riddled letter. Instead of red pen fury, he slid a clean draft over. "This might read smoother. Your call." She reworked it, pride intact. No sting, just a nudge. A student in Cincinnati, Clarence Jones, used this with his son David, a math struggler. Rather than scold wrong answers, he'd say, "Let's try this one another way. See what you think." David caught on, confidence growing. Carnegie learned this young, selling bacon. A storekeeper botched an order. He'd say, "Maybe we can tweak this next time?" Not "You screwed up." Indirect hints guide without wounding. Next mistake you spot. Hint, don't hit. Carnegie bets they'll fix it willingly. Principle 3. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing. Principle 3 humbles us. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Carnegie shares a teaching moment. Correcting a student's speech, he'd first grin. "I butchered my first talk, stumbled over every word. You're ahead of me already. Maybe just tighten this bit." The student smiled, adjusted, no bruised ego. Henry Hankey did this too with Bill. "I've dropped the ball before, once lost a client over a rushed job. Your slip's small, we'll sort it." Carnegie saw it in Lincoln, who, after Meade's Gettysburg blunder, wrote but never sent a rebuke, recalling his own early hot-headed letters. Owning your flops builds trust. Next critique, try, "I've messed up too." It's a bridge, not a barrier. Principle 4. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Principle 4 flips authority. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Carnegie paints a factory scene. A foreman needed a rush job. "Do it now" would have sparked grumbling. Instead, "Can we knock this out by noon?" Workers hustled, feeling consulted. Dale Ferrier, a coarse dad, got his son Jeff picking pears not with "Get to it, but how many baskets can you fill today?" Jeff dove in, eager. Charles Schwab mastered this. "How can we beat last week's quota?" An output soared. Carnegie tried it selling soap. "Could this fit your shelf?" Storekeepers said yes. Questions empower, orders oppress. Next task, ask, "What do you think?" Watch them own it. Principle 5. Let the other person save face. Principle 5 protects dignity. Let the other person save face. Back to Bob Hoover. His mechanic's jet fuel gaffe could have ended in shame. "Prove you're better tomorrow," Hoover said, sparing him a public flogging. Loyalty followed. Carnegie tells of a Philadelphia Gas Works exec, slated for demotion at 65 for his temper. After Carnegie's training, his boss praised his past wins, shifting him to a mentor role. No disgrace, just a pivot. Carnegie saw this in his classes. A salesman flubbed a pitch, and instead of scorn, peers said, You'll nail it next time. He did. Saving face isn't coddling, it's respect. Next error you catch, cushion it. We all slip. Try again. And keep their spirit whole. Principle 6. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Principle 6 fuels growth. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Carnegie shares a parenting win. A couple with surly kids stopped scolding, instead cheering every chore done right. Great sweeping. The kids transformed, chasing more praise. Heath Roper did this with his printer. This corner's sharper than last time. Nice. The guy's work skyrocketed. Carnegie ties it to Schwab's hearty approbation and lavish praise. Workers glowed under specific nods. In his courses, a shy speaker got, "Your intro's stronger," and soon owned the room. Praise isn't vague. It's precise, a spark. Next step forward you see, call it out. That's progress. And watch them run. Principle 7. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Principle 7 inspires. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Carnegie introduces Mrs. Ruth Hopkins, a Brooklyn teacher facing Tommy, the school's bad boy. Day 1. She said, "Tommy, you're a natural leader. I'm counting on you." He straightened up, led the class. No more chaos. Georgette LeBlanc told a maid, "Marie, you've got treasures inside." Marie bloomed, married up, all from a new title. A course student, Bill Parker, told a store manager, "You're big enough to rethink this." The man stocked his goods, living up to it. Carnegie saw this selling. You're a top trader, and they'd prove it. Give a name, leader, star, and they'll reach. Try it. I see you as this. Principle 8. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Principle 8 lifts. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Carnegie tells of a man dreading dance lessons at 40. His first teacher crushed him. Start over. He quit. The next said, "You've got rhythm. Just tweak a step." He danced on, buoyed. Clarence Jones turned his son David's math woes around. "You're close. Let's shave a minute off." David hit 8 minutes, thrilled. Carnegie saw Ely Culbertson, bridge guru, rise from flops because his wife said, "You've got a flair." Encouragement turns mountains to molehills. Next fault, say, "You're nearly there, small fix." And they'll climb. Principle 9. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. Principle 9 seals it. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. Carnegie shares Gunter Schmidt, a German store manager. A clerk botched price tags. Nagging failed. "You're now supervisor of price tags," he said. She glowed. Nailed it. Dale Ferrier paid Jeff $1 per pair basket. "You'll earn big." Jeff grinned, worked harder. Woodrow Wilson lured McAdoo to his cabinet. "You do me a favor joining." McAdoo leapt. Carnegie saw this in class. A kid made lawn detective stop trespassers, proud. Match their joy to your goal. Next ask, frame it as their win. This'll shine for you. And they'll jump. Conclusion, leading with light. Here's part 4's 9. Praise, hint, confess, ask, shield, cheer, name, encourage, delight. Carnegie honed these in 1930s rooms, watching leaders like Hoover and Hopkins turn resistance to zeal. By February 28, 2025, they endure, because we crave dignity, not defeat. From Tommy's turnaround to Jeff's pairs, it's not force, it's finesse. Test 1 tomorrow. Praise a step, ask a question, save a face. Carnegie's not just teaching leadership, he's showing us to lift. Thanks for this dive into part 4. Now lead and change the gentle way. The stories that stick. Carnegie's genius shines in his stories. Take Lincoln, who learned to ditch criticism after nearly dueling over a rash letter. Or Patrick O'Hare, a shy Irish immigrant who, through Carnegie's course, became a confident salesman, charming 2,500 people at the Hotel Pennsylvania in 1935. Then there's Marie the dishwasher, transformed by a kind word into a blooming bride. These aren't just tales, they're proof. Carnegie's students, from bankers to dentists, saw sales jump, marriages mend, and lives shift. A Harvard grad claimed 14 weeks with Carnegie outdid 4 years of college. It's not magic, it's method, rooted in understanding what makes us tick: pride, importance, connection. Conclusion, a legacy of influence. So, what's the takeaway as we close this hour? Carnegie didn't invent human nature, he decoded it. His principles, don't criticize, show appreciation, see their side, aren't tricks, they're a way of life. He promises no less than a richer, fuller existence, and millions, from 1936 to today, February 28, 2025, agree. The book's revised edition keeps its 1930s slang and breezy style, but its core is timeless. Why? Because people haven't changed. We still crave respect, shrink from blame, and bloom under praise. Carnegie's own journey, from a farm boy to a global teacher, mirrors what he offers us, a chance to unlock our latent powers. Is it flawless? No. Some call it manipulative, others overly simple. But Carnegie insists, it works only from the heart. Try it. Smile at a stranger, praise a small win, listen deeply, and watch the ripple. As William James said, we are half awake, using a fraction of our potential. This book wakes us up. So, take Carnegie's 9 suggestions, read actively, apply daily, track your wins. It's not just a book, it's a movement, one conversation at a time. Thanks for joining me. Now, go win some friends and influence your world. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and please remember to subscribe to receive notification of upcoming recordings. See you in next video.